She poured the wine like she was presenting quarterly earnings. No warmth, no ritual. Just the sound of cork easing out, the bottle tilting with precision, and the faintest tremor in her fingers she probably didn't think I'd catch. It was the Pinot from our trip to Oregon, 2020 vintage. She kept it shelved for milestones, anniversaries, promotions, the night we made an offer on this house. This wasn't a toast. It was a signal. A pivot. "We need to have a conversation," she said, sliding the glass across to me. Her voice was gentle, but tight. Practiced. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, about us." I let the silence hold. I've learned that silence unsettles people more than questions. "I think we should consider an evaluation period," she continued, her hands resting carefully on the placemat like a consultant opening a slide deck. "Just 90 days. Structured. Intentional. A time to assess where we are and whether we're truly aligned for the long term." I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just watched the corners of her mouth as she talked, too level, too flat. I used to think her expressions were subtle. Now I saw they were controlled. "This isn't about blame," she said. "It's about compatibility. About making sure we're still compatible in the ways that matter. I've read a few pieces on this lately. Successful couples in our demographic are doing it more. It's proactive. Smart." She used that word again. Smart. Like this was a joint investment she was optimizing. She sipped her wine. Looked me over. Not with love, not even really with concern. More like someone checking if a printer was still under warranty. "I just want us both to have space to reflect. We'll continue to live together, of course. Do weekends, dinners, but with more intentionality. No assumptions. Clearer boundaries. We'll reevaluate at the end." She reached into her folder, yes, an actual manila folder, and pulled out a stapled packet. Titled, "Evaluation Period Framework," printed in Calibri. There were bullet points, timelines, a list of topics for mutual check-ins, clauses about emotional labor and time ownership. I didn't laugh, but I almost did. Not because it was ridiculous, but because she genuinely thought this was the thoughtful, evolved way to end a marriage, without saying she was ending it. I flipped through the first page. Clause 3. Affection and intimacy to be offered without expectation or obligation. Clause 5. Each party retains autonomy to seek external emotional support. Clause 6. Reevaluation to be conducted in person on day 90, or by mutual agreement to extend or terminate cohabitation. She smiled faintly, as if this was a team-building exercise and she was proud of her agenda. "I'm open to edits," she said. "It's just a framework." I nodded slowly. "It's a lot to take in. I know. But I think we owe it to ourselves to do this thoughtfully. Thoughtful. Smart. Strategic." That was the moment I knew she wasn't unsure about me. She'd already made her decision. This was a slow-release exit. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a logistics problem to be solved. I took another sip of wine. "I'll read it more carefully tonight." She softened a little, mistaking my composure for agreement. "I knew you'd understand." I nodded. "Always happy to review performance metrics." She laughed, not realizing I wasn't joking. That I'd already started writing hers in my head. Later, when she went upstairs early, something about a quarterly planning call in the morning, I stayed at the kitchen table. The wine bottle was still mostly full. I poured another glass and opened my laptop. I reread the document under a desk lamp, line by line, and saved a scanned copy to a new hidden drive. Then I created a folder with a name only I would understand. Separation_protocol, private. It was clean for now. Empty. But I knew what she was doing. She was setting the stage. Curating her narrative. Quietly constructing a version of events that framed her as wise, progressive, emotionally honest, someone who tried everything. And I'd play along. For now. But something had shifted. I wasn't the man she thought I was anymore. I wasn't confused or heartbroken. I was alert. Because this wasn't a conversation. It was a performance review. And I'd just become the auditor. The days that followed felt unnervingly normal. She didn't distance herself, didn't turn cold. If anything, she leaned in, overcorrected. Kissed me on the shoulder while I made coffee. Booked a weekend getaway for the two of us at a vineyard spa she knew I liked. Called it a reset ritual. I went along. Let her schedule the massages and wine tastings, her hand in mine as we strolled the grounds like we hadn't just signed a trial separation agreement dressed in HR language. That's what made it worse. the normalcy. The soft smiles, the casual touches, the practiced affection. She was good at it. Too good. She was curating an ending that made her look like the one who cared more. I was the one she tried everything with. But behind the curtain, the seams were fraying. The first inconsistency was minor, a calendar alert on her tablet while she was in the shower. I wasn't snooping. It lit up on the kitchen island. Lunch with Marta, HR strategy sync. It struck me odd because I'd heard her mention Marta once, months ago, and not in any context that made a lunch date likely. I remembered because she'd said the woman was dry as toast and worked out of a satellite office in Dallas. The lunch was scheduled for downtown. Later, she mentioned it again in passing. Had a quick bite with Marta from HR, mostly talked org charts. So dull. She laughed. Casual. Unremarkable. I nodded, filing it away. The next was a meeting scheduled on her calendar labeled Ops Alignment, Delayed Start, at 8:15 p.m. on a Thursday. She was home that night, but oddly evasive. Claimed it ran long. Said she'd finished the rest on mute, while folding laundry upstairs. I asked nothing. Just noted the timestamp. Her laptop was closed by 9 p.m. I checked the screen logs the next morning. She hadn't used it since noon. She made dinner the next night. Something elaborate, steak with chimichurri, her go-to for guilt reduction. She poured us the same wine from evaluation night, then made a toast to shared goals and honest growth. She was smiling wide. Too wide. I'm glad we're being mature about this, she said, lifting her glass. It makes me feel safe. I smiled back. Safety's important. She reached across and touched my hand. I know it's unconventional, but I believe in us, or at least in trying the right way. I nodded, said nothing. Let her talk. I'd learned that about her. Silence draws out more truth than confrontation. Later that night, she handed me a single sheet of paper while we brushed our teeth. Can you sign this? It's just a quick refi update. Boring stuff. Our mortgage guy suggested it to streamline rates during the eval period. I looked it over briefly. Standard jargon. Nothing jumped out. But something about the timing, the calm way she framed it, made me pause. I signed, of course. But the next morning, while she was out, working remote, at a co-working space across town, I scanned it into my private folder. It wasn't just a refi form. It was a revision of our loan structure. Subtle wording changes, legalese about primary equity ownership, shifting upon any cohabitation restructure. If we split, she held 68% of the home. I'd seen these types of clauses before in commercial contracts. They weren't common in personal ones, unless you planned on ending up the sole occupant. That's when it became clear. She wasn't hoping for reconciliation. She was building a fire escape. The sweetest part? She still packed my lunch the next day. Left a handwritten note on top of the Tupperware. Grateful for your grace. XOJ. I kept the note. Scanned that too. By week 3 of the evaluation period, I stopped pretending I was playing catch-up. I wasn't the man quietly hoping my wife would find her way back. I was the man tracking her digital footprints in real time while she made lentil soup and asked about my day. Getting into her cloud backup wasn't difficult. Years ago, we'd set up everything together, a shared photo stream, cross-device syncing, cloud calendars. She never changed the passwords. She probably thought I wouldn't notice the permissions refresh she triggered 2 days before our conversation over wine. But I did. I restored my admin rights without notifying her, bypassed her 2-factor prompts to a spoofed code from an old backup device she didn't remember was still connected. Not illegal. Not invasive. Just quietly strategic. Within 48 hours, the veneer cracked. Rideshare logs were first. A trip downtown logged on a Tuesday evening, originating from her office and terminating at the doorstep of a 5-star hotel. The same night she claimed she had a Zoom check-in with Regional. She told me she worked late in the break room with a few teammates to prep a slide deck. There was no group, no slide deck, just a black town car, a single check-in under her name, and a return trip around 1:42 a.m. I traced the ride route through the map log. The drop-off pin was tagged. Caraway Residences, valet entrance. That wasn't office culture. That was private discretion. Still, I didn't confront. I documented. The next breadcrumb came in the form of synced photo backups. Low-res, often blurred, but 2 stood out. Both taken through the restaurant window of a corner booth at a place called Nora, across town from her usual haunts. One showed a man across from her, Crisp navy suit. Silver cufflinks. Salt and pepper hair cropped close. The angle made it difficult to identify him outright, but I recognized the outline of his face. The nose. The watch. David Ramos. He was a senior exec at her firm. The kind who hosted department holiday parties at his house, where the whiskey was poured in crystal and the toasts were always just a little too personal. He had once toasted our wedding anniversary. 10 years, he'd said with raised glass. Power couples are rare, especially when both parties are this ambitious. He was married. I remembered his wife. Sweet, a little reserved, always smiling like she didn't fully get the joke but didn't want to make a scene. I cross-referenced that restaurant receipt from our shared account. She'd labeled it client networking. There was no client, only 2 entrees, a shared bottle of Burlo, and a dessert for 2. Her story cracked further when her shared finance app, the one we both stopped actively using but never disabled, showed an unusual transfer, $14,500 from our joint savings into an account I'd never seen before. A private credit union, not our main bank. The transfer note was marked emergency liquidity buffer. She hadn't said a word. She was planning for escape, moving money, repositioning assets, and she thought I was too passive or too trusting to dig beneath her polite phrasing and curated affection. She didn't know I'd begun cross-referencing every document she handed me, that I'd saved our shared mortgage agreements and started comparing them with the new refinance clause she'd pushed under my nose that night. She used language that redefined equity weight, subtle, insidious. If we separated under the terms of her evaluation framework, she'd walk away with control of the house, more than half of our liquid assets, and a story that painted her as the mature, level-headed partner who'd tried. Intentional separation. She didn't think I was watching, but I had eyes on her calendar, her GPS, her cloud storage, her financial drifts, and now, her lover. Marta from HR? That was David Ramos. The alias was just smart enough to sound boring. I added it all to the folder, created a subdirectory, affair_log Ramos, timestamped every photo, saved route maps, screen grabbed call logs, logged receipts by date and location. I wasn't hurt yet. Not the kind of hurt she expected anyway. I was just getting precise. The irony didn't fully hit until I remembered the anniversary party. 3 years ago, backyard lights strung between rented heaters, her playlist humming through hidden speakers. David Ramos had stood in our garden with a drink in hand, looking every bit the elder statesman of modern business success. White teeth, Loro Piana blazer, his arm around Julia's shoulder as he made a toast about loyalty and shared ambition. Power couples are rare, he'd said, lifting his glass toward us. When 2 alphas pull the same direction, there's no ceiling. People clapped. Julia laughed a little too brightly, flushed from the wine. I'd shaken his hand that night and thanked him. Me, thanking the man who would later share hotel pillows with my wife and use my name to sign company paperwork behind my back. Back then, I believed in what he said. Now I knew he wasn't wrong, just wrong about who he was partnered with. The affair was clear. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came when I dug into the refinance document Julia had asked me to sign weeks earlier, the one I'd scanned and stored without a word. Something in the language had bothered me, but I couldn't quite pin it down, so I reached out to a friend in private equity, told him I was advising a relative on a joint property dispute. He called back an hour later. His voice was calm, but edged. Your wife inserted a severability clause that kicks in under any period of formalized relational restructure, he said, reading directly from the document. I felt my jaw tighten. And she gets controlling equity, he continued. And it's retroactive if the restructure was mutually signed. I leaned back in my chair, the ceiling suddenly feeling lower. You mean the evaluation period? Exactly. It's phrased legally vague, but it's enforceable, he said. You signed your leverage away. I didn't respond, just stared at the screen, then slowly ended the call. No anger, just precision. I printed the clause, slipped it into a plastic sleeve, and added it to the folder. Another piece of her architecture, quietly dismantled. Then the transfers escalated. 2 more from joint savings, each just under $10,000, each filed under innocuous tags. Insurance buffer, mid-year tuition adjustment. All moved into that same private credit union account. She was siphoning the funds gradually, carefully, just below the threshold that would trigger joint account alerts. Not dramatic, but deliberate enough to make a difference. She was staging an exit with plausible deniability. If I ever questioned it, she'd say it was just financial prudence during a transition. And David? He wasn't just the affair partner. A document showed up in her synced files, an internal firm memo regarding a cross-functional growth proposal. It listed my name, not hers. Mine. The proposal was for a new consulting initiative, budget attached, approval route documented, but I'd never heard of it. I wasn't on any proposal. I hadn't authorized the use of my name or credentials. David had filled it out. Julia had signed off as his supervisor. They had used me, my name, my title, my office address, to add gravitas to a funding request that would later be traced back to both of them. This wasn't just betrayal. It was corporate exposure, fraud. It shifted everything. I sat in my office and looked out the window for a long time that night. Not with rage. Not even sorrow. Just calculation. This wasn't about love anymore. It was about containment, damage control, strategy. I built the folder into a case file. It now contained GPS and rideshare logs, hotel receipts under her name, photos of her and David at multiple locations, transfers from joint accounts, her evaluation agreement, with the severability clause, the refinance clause, a copy of the internal memo with my forged listing. She thought this was a well-managed departure, a dignified restructuring. She didn't realize she'd crossed into professional misconduct. I named the final section of the folder Exit Strategy, Julia R., Timeline and Evidence, and I waited. Because when a performance ends, the curtains don't drop quietly, they fall hard. She told me she was going on a wellness retreat with 2 former colleagues from her startup days. A women's weekend to disconnect, journal, sweat it out, come back aligned. It was believable. Almost charming. She even showed me the retreat website, clean typography, sage green accents, pictures of smiling women doing yoga by a lake. Her voice was light when she mentioned it, like it was just something she needed, something that would help her be a better partner. The evaluation period had made her so self-aware, she said. She hugged me at the airport. No guilt in her face. Just confidence. Maybe even pity. She thought I was still playing catch-up. I didn't stop her. The night she left, I sent a bouquet of calla lilies to her room. I used the alias she'd been hiding behind. From him. No name. She texted back at 9:18 p.m. Thanks. The girls loved them. Spa day tomorrow. XO. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I called the hotel concierge. No group reservation under that name, the voice said. Just one room booked. Julia Rayner. Checked in with a +1. Mr. Ramos. She wasn't even cautious anymore. She was settled in the narrative she'd written for herself, that I was too decent, too slow, too passive to fight back. She was half right. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to throw anything. I was going to end it like a report, factually, efficiently, with supporting documentation and a final recommendation. The next morning, I printed everything. The rideshare log showing her hotel visits, concierge confirmation of her and David's reservation, dinner receipts from nights she claimed to be in late meetings, GPS routes cross-referenced with her calendar entries, screenshots of her messages to me, the refinance clause she'd buried in a single-page sign-off, a copy of the internal memo with my forged name, her original, evaluation period, document, and I included one extra page, a single, clean sheet, with the words, "You used business metrics to measure a marriage. Here's my performance review of you." Sunday morning I made coffee. She returned from the retreat glowing, energized, back to her curated sincerity. "I feel reset," she said, dropping her bag. "It's like I can finally see us again." She made eggs, hummed a tune. The scent of eucalyptus clung to her. I waited until she plated the food. Then I set the folder down beside her dish, calm as stone. "What's this?" she asked. I didn't answer. Just sat. Watched her open the cover. Her hands stilled when she saw the first photo. They tightened when she reached the hotel bill. By the time she hit the forged memo, her face had drained of color. This isn't what it looks like," she started, but I held up a hand. Just once. Not to silence her, but to mark the boundaries she would not cross. I said, "Evaluation period over. Position eliminated. Exit paperwork has already been filed." Her mouth opened, closed again. She reached for a defense, a justification, maybe even pity. But I stood, picked up my plate, walked it to the sink. Behind me, I heard her whisper, "Wait." But I was done waiting. The performance was over. The house lights were up, and the truth looked terrible in daylight. She didn't leave right away. That surprised me. For 3 days she moved through the house like someone walking through the aftermath of a fire, touching the backs of chairs she used to sit in, standing too long in the doorway of our bedroom, her hand grazing the frame like it could still open to a different story. She asked if we could talk, as if the problem had been a misunderstanding in tone, not a calculated series of betrayals both personal and professional. I said nothing. When I spoke, it was only through my attorney. Divorce paperwork was served within the week, pre-filed. She opened the envelope in the driveway and stood there for almost a full minute before walking back inside without a word. Her hands were shaking. She was still trying to find her narrative, still rehearsing a line she thought might redeem the ending. But this wasn't a play anymore. This was a case file. My lawyer had already begun the discovery process. Financial audits, property value assessments. A forensic accountant reviewed our savings transfers and documented the gradual siphoning into her private account. Every transaction was annotated, date-stamped, traced. She tried to explain the refinance as a clerical misunderstanding. Then, when that didn't work, she called it an abundance of caution during a time of mutual ambiguity. But ambiguity doesn't hold up against forged signatures and asset concealment. The big turn came 3 weeks later. I was in a conference call when I got a ping from my attorney. Subject line: urgent, compliance contact from Julia's firm. It turned out Julia's company had initiated an internal review based on an anonymous tip, the memo I'd included in the evidence folder. David Ramos had listed me as an external consultant in a proposal that received early-stage funding. Julia had signed off on the final submission. My name, my office address, my supposed endorsement. The problem? I'd never agreed. Never even seen the proposal until I found it buried in her sync drive. My signature was forged. That moved the issue from personal betrayal to professional misconduct. Her firm's compliance office opened a formal inquiry. HR conducted interviews. Julia was placed on immediate leave pending the review. Ramos resigned quietly within a week. No email, no farewell lunch. My attorney forwarded me a draft of the statement they intended to submit to the state's professional licensing board. Fraud, misrepresentation, collusion. Her license wasn't just under scrutiny, it was now in jeopardy. She called once. I didn't answer. She emailed. This got out of control. I didn't mean for it to go this way. I forwarded it to my lawyer. Her future was unraveling not because she had an affair, but because she tried to end a marriage like a merger, quietly, cleanly, manipulatively, and forgot that due diligence works both ways. She became a flag name in her firm's database, blacklisted from vendor partnerships, informally blackballed from consulting boards. The equity she tried to steal? Froze in escrow pending litigation. And me? I stayed quiet, controlled, precise, until one final envelope arrived. No return address. Inside, a folded sheet of paper, the original evaluation period agreement, creased, worn. At the bottom, in her handwriting. I never expected it to end like this. I sat with it for a while. Then I printed the complaint summary from the compliance board, slipped it into the envelope, wrote one final label, termination memo filed, and I burned it, one corner at a time.